And you will notice the temperament and the behavior towards humanity changes abruptly. The Old Covenant God of Abraham, the God of war, the God that demands sacrifice of a firstborn son, all this God changes into a God who is, in essence, a God of love. So this change from Judaism to Christianity created a much more accessible God, a God which accepted prayer over sacrifice. And he is so different as to be unrecognizable. Now, the Christians still recognized him through Leviticus as the Lord God is God of war. And this is what enabled Christians to wage war in their defense. What the God of the New Testament would advise against, would admonish against, would be murder. Now, there is an enormous difference between killing and murder. I don't care what some liberal progressive would say. The reality is that killing, when done in the name of national or personal survival, is not murder. Killing, if you're a police officer and you're honestly faced with a hostage situation and it's going to go down where innocent people are going to die, and you take out somebody that would otherwise take out innocent lives, how could anyone consider that murder? Now, I use the peace officer example, I think, appropriately, because they would have a chance, more so statistically than other people, to be provided opportunity in which those decisions would have to be made of whether they pull a trigger or not. We often talk about all of the mistakes that are made. We talk about things that are done wrong by really corrupt, just evil departmental peace officers or correctional officers. Nevertheless, they are a necessary evil, a necessary part of maintenance of a state of order and an antithesis to anarchy. So in the name of upholding that line, we have certainly made a mistake in creating the new breed of a warrior cop or a militarized cop. But if we go back to their original intent, the spirit of the creation of their profession, we are giving someone a license to kill in the name of preservation of the peace. So at that point, that's different from murder, which is to premeditate, to lie in wait, to lurk with intent. Now, that to be done for selfish, personal reasons of gain, that would be murder. War can lead to incidents of mass murder or massacre. War, however, in and of itself, is not murder. It is a necessary and part of being human. It is part of the human condition. Now, the original Old Testament God, as I have brought up before, was incredibly, for lack of a better word, bloodthirsty. And in terms of that God of war, he gave the Judaic, Semitic peoples, the tribe that were brothers with Ishmael, that are supposedly the descendants of Muhammad and the founders of what would ultimately become Islam, the worshippers of Allah, the moon god, the sword god, the war god. The other sons of Abraham were genetically indiscernible from the Ishmaelites or the founders of Islam. And these Semitic peoples had a God that would demand what the Hebrew sacrificial term deemed as Holocaust. Holocaust was a mass Hebrew sacrifice to God, a burnt offering that had to be completely consumed so God got everything and nothing was left for man. The Holocaust turned out to be the Judaic version of crusade or jihad, Now, in terms of that extremely useful ritual, it was employed whenever the Hebrews decided to improve their economic lot in the world. When they left Egypt and set their sights on the fertile land of Canaan, they were, of course, forced into facing the awkward fact that their promised land, that Moses was leading them unto, was already occupied by a lot of people who liked it very much and didn't want to move. But a practical and pious final solution was at hand. The Hebrews simply dedicated their Canaanite neighbors unto God. They made them worthy kindling for a proper holocaust. All of the Canaanite cities were sacked, torched, along with everything and everyone within them, man, woman, and child, because, after all, it would have been sinful to leave anything unburned. So the Hebrews took the best farmland between the Nile and the Euphrates and made points with their God for grabbing it, while the Canaanites just got burned. And with that in mind, this was in the days when the Jewish people were truly Semitic. Now, of course, they expanded, their empire prospered under a very bloodthirsty, warmongering, some would say cruel or even psychotic divinity. And this led to an expansion all the way up the Caucasian Peninsula, up through the Caspian Sea Isthmus, and the forced conversion of other ethnic groups, the predominant, the largest, the most powerful being a very warlike Turkic tribe known as the Hazar. And they were ethnically not Semitic at all. And the Hazar ultimately created an empire in which they enslaved millions of Slavic people and gave us the very words of slave and Slav, which descend from the same etymological root. And these Hazar, with the collapse of their empire hundreds of years later, migrated, fled, mass relocated themselves into Central Europe, forming what became the Jewish ghettos throughout Lodz, throughout Prague, all the rest of these Eastern European cities throughout the Jewish Pale of Settlement and economic empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, and formed a livid hatred amongst those people who felt themselves oppressed by this economic elite that was wealthy enough to purchase their sons' and daughters' education and establish themselves as all of the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, etc., while everyone else was living as a serf or a peasant. Now, the original Hazar tribes themselves, of course, had no one who loved them or retained any fond memories of them because of their years as cruel taskmasters and slave masters throughout the Black Sea and Caspian regions. And when they fled into Central Europe, everyone had another reason to hate them. The Christians, as the Muslims, hated money as the root of all evil. Therefore, the Muslims eliminated the concept of loans due to Muhammad's anti-usury laws. And the Christians, of course, believed money is the root of all evil. So both of these religious superpowers left their money keeping to the Jews. In the main part, the dislocated Hazar Turkic peoples. And this created a hatred for them as the manipulators of economy, making and breaking fortunes, and ultimately led to that which occurred during the time of the Third Reich and what the Jewish people have promoted as